Hi, everybody, and welcome to the broadcast. This is Carol Muller with Action for Healthy Kids, and we're going to wait just about one more minute before we get started. Let other people join us. Hi, everyone. This webinar is Making the Case for School Wellness, and it's brought to you by Action for Healthy Kids. My name is Carol Muller, and I am the Regional Field Manager for Colorado. And also with us today, we have Leslie Lewis. She is our Action for Healthy Kids State Coordinator in Louisiana. She's also a dietitian, and she's worked on childhood obesity issues for 10 years, and she's a parent with 3 kids. And her oldest kid is just starting her school experience.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. This is Carol Muller. I am the Regional Field Manager for Colorado for Action for Healthy Kids. And we are talking today about making the case for school wellness. Also today we have with us Leslie Lewis. She is the State Coordinator for Louisiana for Action for Healthy Kids, and she's also a dietitian, and she's worked on childhood obesity issues for over 10 years. She's also the parent of 3 kids. Also with us today, a little later in the presentation, is Deirdre Sullivan. She is a health educator and a parent advocate in Poudre School District for the past 6 years, right here in Colorado. So today we're going to be talking about how to make the case for school wellness. But before we get started, I just want to go over some of the logistics for the webinar. Once you are linked in, you should see a control panel, which is usually on the right side of your screen. You can use your telephone or your speakers to listen to the presentation, but everyone will be muted so that we don't hear your puppy dog barking or your doorbell ringing. There's a dialog box at the bottom of your control panel. Please feel free to type any questions into the box as we go along, and we will do our best to get them answered later in the presentation or via email if that's the best option. Note that the webinar is being recorded. Links to the recording and the handouts will be sent out to you 2 to 3 days after the webinar. So that said, let's get started. First of all, I'd like to give you a little background on Action for Healthy Kids. We are a national nonprofit. We fight childhood obesity, undernourishment, and physical inactivity by helping schools become healthier places. We are moms and dads, teachers, students, school and community leaders, and school wellness experts. And we've all banded together to create healthier learning environments for our children. We really believe that everybody has a part to play in ending the nation's childhood obesity epidemic, and we have lots of great tools, programs, and resources to make that possible. We were founded in 2002 by former Surgeon General David Thatcher, and today we have more than 50,000 members. We also partner with dozens of professional associations, government agencies, and corporations at both the national and the local level. So this presentation is part of the Action for Healthy Kids Parent Leadership Series. Now, Action for Healthy Kids believes that parents really do play a crucial role in creating healthy school communities. We found over our decade in the field that school communities that include strong parent advocates are generally a lot more effective at creating changes which turn out to be sustainable and permanent. And we've developed this series to provide parents and school wellness advocates with the tools and knowledge you'll need to make your efforts a success. So on your screen, you'll see the topics that are covered in the series. Now, they've been divided into 6 separate webinars, And we'll be presenting those live throughout the year, and we'll always have the latest ones archived for you to view later. So today's is focused on the first topic in the series, which is making the case for school wellness. Sorry guys, I'm losing my screen. So we're going to cover why it's important to make the case to your community before you get started. We're also going to share some information about childhood obesity and the learning connection, which you can use in your work. We're going to cover some common school customs and how they can send conflicting messages. And we're going to share best practices out there for healthy schools that different communities are using all throughout the country. We're going to talk about what to share and how to share them. And then we'll give you some answers to common questions and concerns that may come up. And that'll be from our parent expert, Deirdre Sullivan. So that said, I'm going to turn it over to Leslie, and she's going to get us started.
All right, well, thanks so much. So like Carol mentioned, the first thing we'll talk about is why it's necessary to even make the case for school wellness. So making the case is really the essential first step towards creating a healthier school culture. And as a health advocate promoting school wellness, it's really important that you and all of us know how to convey these messages and that these efforts are really so important. So the why is what will get your school community behind you, and the what will really build the support for everything that comes next. You really must sell them on the why before you can go into the what or the how. So have you ever heard a parent or a teacher or a principal say something like, schools are supposed to teach kids about reading, writing, and math. This is not the time or the place to teach them about healthy habits. You know, it's really not our job to teach them about health. So it's really our job and your job to convince them that health really should be an essential part of every school. And here's why. So schools reach most children and adolescents in a community, and school policies, programs, and practices really reinforce those behaviors that they are learning. Schools provide opportunities to practice healthy behaviors, and kids spend about 1,200 hours per year in a school environment. Teachers, administrators, and school staff are really the key role models, and so are the parent volunteers at the school. And lastly, curriculum standards for health usually include nutrition and physical education, so shouldn't our practices and climate reflect those standards rather than conflict with them? You know, the bottom line really is that schools show kids what we value and what is important in our communities. So it's important that all of our messages are in line. Most importantly, healthy kids learn better. You know, for that reason alone, schools should be addressing the issue and providing the healthiest environment possible. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the learning connection shortly. But first, let's take a look at obesity in America. So look at this quote from two former chairmen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Being overweight or obese has become the leading medical reason recruits are rejected for military service. So I think we all can agree that most people know that the U.S. is suffering from an obesity crisis. But do they really know just how serious it is? They don't really understand how it relates to their personal lives or their school environment. You know, they might not necessarily understand all of the different ways that they might be contributing to it or the different ways that they can help solve it. So as wellness advocates, it's really our job to make these connections for them and to create really a sense of urgency about this national crisis. One great visual and striking tool is the series of slides from the Centers of Disease Control that shows the increase in obesity in the United States since 1985. So states on the map will change in color as their obesity rates increase. So you can just note as they change, and as the brand new colors appear, it just means that a higher percentage range has added to accommodate the growing data. So there you go. You can see there's not a blue state left. Colorado really held out for a long time, but now it's got the second fastest growing childhood obesity rate in the nation. Colorado's children went from 4th leanest to 23rd leanest in just under 3 years. However, there is some good news reported by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the Trust for America's Health. In their annual report, Act as in Fat, it was reported recently that after 3 decades of increases, adult obesity rates remain level in almost every state. However, the rates still are very high, as you can see on the slide. So we really need to educate parents and school staff about the negative impacts of unhealthy school practices, the inadequate school wellness policies, and the consequences of really the inaction. Not only will this give you the buy-in and support you need to move your initiatives forward, it would also give you the confidence to speak up about it. Concern for their children's future can really prod parents and others into action.
So it's a really good idea to have several statistics ready when you are talking to members of your school community. You want to share the facts in a compelling yet sensitive way. You don't want to overwhelm people with too much data. Just use a few very carefully placed and easily understandable facts, and stick to the ones that really are the most memorable and the most striking. So there's a couple of examples there on the slide. Close to 1/3 of our kids are overweight or obese across the country. And here's a great one that people can really understand. Our kids spend an average of over 7 hours in front of the TV or computer every day for non-school purposes. So if you can find local statistics from your state or your school or your district, like the ones we shared from Colorado just a couple minutes ago, that's even better. The CDC, that's the Centers for Disease Control, and the Data Resource Center are great sources of childhood obesity data, as well as our website at Action for Healthy Kids. So along with obesity information, you'll want to create a sense of urgency by making the connection between health and academic achievement, as Leslie mentioned just a minute ago. This is really, really important. You want to let others know that increased physical activity and improved nutrition has been shown in study after study to increase student achievement. Studies have shown that undernourished children tend to have low energy, they're often irritable, and they have difficulty concentrating. They also have been shown to score lower on vocabulary, reading comprehension, and arithmetic tests. This study of 5,000 children in the Journal of School Health shows it's not just about whether you eat, it's also about what you eat. This study found a significant association between the quality of your diet and school performance. And what about school breakfast? How many kids eat a healthy breakfast before school starts? Many kids don't eat breakfast at all. Now, if they're hungry, of course, they're not going into their classes ready to learn. So there's a growing body of research that shows that skipping breakfast really does hurt kids' overall cognitive performance. And students who eat school breakfast have been shown on average to attend 1.5 more days of school per year and score 17.5% higher on standardized math tests.
So in addition, what about physical activity? Increased physical activity is also related to school performance. Kids who get regular physical activity experience improvement in their fitness levels and their brain function. So when kids move more, they are better positioned to succeed in the classroom. Studies like the one listed on these slides show that increased physical activity leads to improved math, reading, and writing test scores. Overweight kids miss school 4 times as much as normal weight kids, and that's often due to illness and both social concerns as well. Teachers, office staff, and school nurses can certainly relate to this. And of course, if kids aren't in school, they can't learn. The Learning Connection is a great resource from Action for Healthy Kids that you can use to share the connection between physical activity, healthy eating, and learning. It's an easy-to-read report that summarizes the most recent research, providing that healthy kids are indeed better learners. And many of the facts that we've been speaking about so far are shared in this report.
So just as important as sharing the facts, you want to try to make a link to people's personal lives. You can ask people questions. Do they know anybody who has a chronic disease? Do they know somebody who's always struggling with their weight? Really, a lot of people who get involved with health and wellness in schools do so because they've seen the consequences of living an unhealthy lifestyle play out with somebody in their own family. And when you ask them personal questions like this, you really encourage people to put a face on the information that you're providing, and that's going to make it a lot more meaningful to them. So encourage your audience to share their stories if you're in an appropriate setting, and of course, if you think that they're comfortable doing so. And when you're talking to school staff, be sure to put the issues into a school context. Questions like, how many students visit the nurse's office or miss school because they're sick? How many kids can't run around in PE or at recess because they're not fit? And how many kids don't eat breakfast before school starts? So for all of these audiences, be sure to connect your message with daily practices taking place at your school. Is your school sending conflicting messages about health and about what's valued? Here's some great examples that you can use. Let's start with rewards. Does your school reward students in a healthy way with certificates, small toys, or extra recess time? Or do you use fast food coupons, popsicles, and candy? So rewards happen at many levels across the school, in the classroom, at school-wide events, and for PTA-sponsored activities as well. Now, experts recommend non-food rewards as a best practice. That's because providing food based on performance or behavior can teach children to eat when they're not hungry, and that can be a big factor in our growing obesity epidemic. So take a look at this example. Fitness winners are rewarded with a donut party. This actually happened in my son's kindergarten class. What kind of messages are these young athletes receiving? I love this quote from Marlene Schwartz at Yale's Rudd Center for Food Policy and Obesity regarding food rewards and the confusing messages that they send. She says that rewarding kids with unhealthy foods in school is like teaching them a lesson on the importance of not smoking and then handing out ashtrays and lighters to the kids who did the best job listening. Oh, come on, it's just a mint. So when you hear a comment like that, and I've heard that plenty of times, I've probably even said it a few times, but that's a really good opportunity to use a visual aid. Show your audience what happens when a child receives just 1 mint per day from a teacher, a friend, or another adult. Over the course of the school year, that can add up to over 3 cups of additional sugar and 3,600 extra calories. So hold up a mint and a bag with 3 cups of sugar while you point out that it's never just 1 mint a day. Kids get candy everywhere they go these days, and we love giving them treats, but we just don't understand how quickly it adds up. And the bag of sugar will really help to demonstrate your point. And let's talk about celebrations. In class, our kids learn about nutrition, healthy eating, and the importance of moderation. But then, in some classrooms, students eat birthday treats over 25 times each year, in addition to their holiday parties. There was a recent study that was published in the Journal of Nutrition, Education, and Behavior, which revealed that kids can eat as many as 1/3 of all the calories they need in a day at a typical half-hour birthday party.
Let's also talk about the PTO and the PTA. Their message is important, also, but can also be very confusing. So here's a typical calendar of parent-led activities and events. So there's a healthy fun run, but then it's followed by a fundraiser at a fast food restaurant. And then look at the prize for TV Turn-Off Week. TV Turn-Off Week. It's a high-calorie pancake party, or it could be something similar. I know we all see these type of examples all of the time. So parent groups really play a large role in choosing and running the fundraisers, which support sports, music, technology, and the arts. However, what do they often promote? So look at these examples as well. Your fundraisers can either promote healthy living or can promote, the total opposite. You've got restaurant nights promoting fast food, sales of cookie dough or candy bars, but then you can also have things like fruit sales or seed packets or active fundraisers. Wouldn't those align much better with what we're teaching and what we're trying to promote in our schools? And then how about our family events? So here are some common themes that I'm sure you often see at your child's school or the school you're affiliated with. You have your school carnival, you might have donuts with dads or muffins with moms. You know, the list really does go on and on. So it's really important that all of our events really coincide with the healthy messages that we're trying to teach our kids. So we've talked a lot about nutrition and a little bit about physical activity, but it's really important to show that students learn that physical activity is critical to lead a long and healthy life when they're in, the classroom. However, recess time is often shrinking. So in most schools, recess time is taken out to make room for more academics or for students to make up homeworks or tests. Recess is also taken away for disciplinary purpose when a kid might act up. And often it's these kids that may be the ones who can't sit still in class and who really need the recess time the most. Now less than 10% of public schools offer daily PE, where in the past it used to be, just a daily routine. So your role as a wellness advocate is really to point out the contrast to the audience that you're speaking with. The point is really not to lay blame, but it's to show how confusing that all of these messages are for our children. How will the children really know what we value when we say one thing and then we do another? When your audience sees that the messages are conflicting, then they might be more likely to see their part in both the problem and the solution.
So let's talk about the solution. And I want to emphasize how important it is to focus most of your discussion around solutions. Being negative or confrontational is not going to get you nearly as far as asking for your audience help and offering them a way to be a part of the solution. So sharing best practices is really the best way to present your solutions. Tell your audience what's happening with school wellness policies and practices, both in your own district, and also share best practices from other districts and other schools so that they can place your ideas and your initiatives and your concerns in the proper context. What is your district working on in terms of health? Have there been healthy changes to the lunch menus, or are there changes in the works? Is the wellness policy being used? Has it been updated recently? How about your district wellness committee or health advisory council? Does it meet regularly? What does it work on? And is the council making their efforts and results public to help promote the work, preferably on the district website? So there's a lot of different things that may be going on that you can share. So what are the healthiest schools doing then in terms of nutrition and physical activity? Let's take just a few minutes to go over the recommended best practices that you can share. First off, make healthy options standard whenever foods are shared. We're talking about parties and fundraisers, school events and celebrations, both in and outside of the classroom. This can also include snack time, school stores, vending machines, and athletic events. Choose fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, low-fat, fat-free dairy products whenever possible. How about a watermelon social instead of an ice cream social? Or how about a yogurt and fruit bar? Now, water is especially important. Kids need so much water, and too often sugary drinks are their primary source. Water should always be front and center at any event. And food does not have to be the primary focus or even included in every event. You can host active events which promote physical activity along with music, art, and games. How about an active fundraiser like the Hippity Hopathon that's pictured on the slide from an elementary school in Ohio? At that fundraiser, all the kids got one of the Hippity Hop balls to use during the fundraiser, and then they purchased them and took them home, and so of course the hopping kept on long after the event was over. So whether you're a teacher, a parent, or an administrator, provide students with those non-food rewards for good behavior and performance that we already mentioned. Special privileges and trinkets that both fit the bill.
So another great option is to work with your school nutrition department to support the new healthy meals that are being provided. So you can learn about how school meal programs work and what you can do to support the school meal improvements, and really just be a resource to the food service staff. There's also increased opportunities for nutrition education. So you can supplement what is being taught in the classroom through things like school gardens, healthy snack programs, taste tests, healthy vending, and school stores. How about offering health tips in your school newsletter or bringing in special workshops for students and families? And then, of course, you can also help increase opportunities for physical activity through the school day and beyond. So you can think about the classroom activity breaks or offer more or better recess before and after school programs. Think about things like a walk to school or a bike to school program. And then this is really important, is to build support for these healthy practices and ensure that they will continue. You really need to urge school leaders to write them into school policy and to the school guidelines. You're really incorporating them into school improvement goals to stay on track and keep attention focused on health as the priority. Because if they're not in policy, in 1 to 2 years down the line, they might not exist anymore. A great way to share best practices is by using success stories. So you can find out what types of programs and initiatives have been successful in your area. You can look for relevant local success stories. If you know a school that has been successful in something particular, then it might be easier to get another school on board. And often, there's competition between schools and between districts. So use that to your advantage. If you're making the case to parents, share successful parent-led or PTA initiatives. If you're making the case to teachers or administrators, share success stories that other teachers or other administrators have implemented. Really remember to point out impacts in the terms that will resonate with that particular audience. If you talk about, X school across town started a breakfast in the classroom program. As a result, students are more focused, attendance have increased, parties have decreased, and visits to, the nurse's office have declined, then that's something that school administration really might be particularly interested about. So here's a great example that you can use from our website. It's from Spar Elementary in Ocala, Florida, where they implemented the Game On, the Ultimate Wellness Challenge, which is Action for Healthy Kids' free wellness program for elementary schools. They had a lot of different activities, and at one point they did a vegetable taste test with 4th grade students, and the teachers were amazed that after the taste test, the students unanimously chose to have the vegetables rather than the cookies, candies, chips at their holiday party. In addition to changing the kids' attitudes and preferences about the food, the school also experienced dramatic increases in their test scores after promoting healthy eating and physical activity. So the Learning Connection also has some great success stories that you can use, and there's also some that you can pull from our website.
All right. Thanks, Leslie. So now you're out there and say you've made your case to your school audience using a lot of the information that we've talked about. You've pointed out the contrasts, shared the best practices, you've shared some obesity statistics. So ideally, everybody at your school is now going to be in perfect agreement, right? Of course, that's the ideal. That's how we hope it will go. But in reality, most likely, there are going to be some questions and there are going to be some concerns about what you want to do. So we've put together a list of common questions and concerns that we've heard from many parents and school leaders, and we've invited Deirdre Sullivan, our parent expert, to weigh in on these questions. So Deirdre worked in Poudre School District for the University of Colorado, in northern Colorado for 6 years. She worked with parents in schools, and she achieved success with school-level changes related to healthy fundraising, before and after school programs, increasing PE, and as well as larger district changes. She was instrumental in advocating and successfully getting health added to school board policy. She helped reform meal programs and include health and PE on the mill levy. So Deirdre is an awesome parent, educator, and a school health advocate, and really the perfect person to help us answer these questions. She's going to tell us how to answer them, since we can't have her right with us when we are trying to talk to our own school communities. So Deirdre, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm sure you've seen this question before. I know I've heard it many times. Deirdre, we're just too busy, as a school and as a school community. How do we fit these wellness projects into our schedule?
So a lot of times we get acknowledgement from school leaders that wellness is important, but they don't have the time or resources to commit to it. I think it's important to reassure school leaders that you're not asking for a large time commitment. The biggest thing you need is their support, and then a lot of the work can be done as a committee by parents, and even starting small. Things don't take a lot of time, but they're just about changing the way that we've always done things, or maybe looking at our norms around things. So one example might be, how much time does it take to work on a school policy to eliminate removing recess as a punishment for students? It's really not a lot of time. We're not talking about putting on a health fair or a produce distribution program or anything like that. It's just a small little tweak that we might make that have a huge impact on kids' physical activity levels. So I think that's really important, is just to get their support and start small.
All right, here's another one. Shouldn't we be focusing on academics?
This is a critical issue, and I think any time that we're trying to influence change within a system, it's really important to speak the language that the system most resonates with. And, schools are facing increasing academic pressures and all these competing priorities. Teachers and administrators are often worried that the things that we're demanding, so to speak, are going to take away from those academics. So it's really important, in my experience here, we almost put the childhood obesity data and motivator in our back pocket, and we really use the whole connection between health and learning that you heard more about in the early portion of this webinar. And I think that's really important, is because they'll say to you, well, just right before you were here, the drug abuse prevention folks were here, and before that it was, dealing with child abuse, and schools are being required to deal with more and more and more societal issues, and so to come to them with this national crisis of childhood obesity without really helping make a link to the things that they're concerned about, academic achievement, student attention and focus, and those kind of things are really important. There's a great example from Gunnison, Colorado. Gunnison Elementary won a state-level Healthy School Champion Award back in 2012. The school describes their program as a, quote, high-functioning, best practice-driven, creative, effective, and fun-coordinated school health program. And as you can see from the quote on the slide, they believe that increases in test scores and attendance have a strong connection to their wellness program. So there's examples from all over the state. Naperville, Illinois has some wonderful data about test scores and students' academic achievement data. There's some great work, the Cooper study out of Texas. And so I think it's very important to have those as, depending on the readiness and willingness in your school community, to have those as your primary sources of influence, with the childhood health and obesity crisis as kind of a secondary, just to show schools that we do understand the academic pressure that they're under and want to be helpful and not competitive.
That's great. Thanks, Deirdre. I think linking it back to their own mission is key, so you're right on about that. All right, so here's another one. It's not the school's job to teach healthy habits. Isn't that the parent's job? Kind of related, but do you want to add anything?
Well, to me, this is an argument that I would use in my favor to say, absolutely, it is our job, and we want to partner with schools. No one's asking for schools to solve this on their own, but we need them to back us up. You know, for me to teach my kids at home about healthy choices, or even more so, like you mentioned in your presentation about sometimes our words don't coincide with our actions. So my kids are, you know, in their nutrition education lesson getting the My Plate lecture or, you know, lesson, and then right after they're going to have a Valentine party full of junk food and unhealthy choices that don't help complete that My Plate the way that they were just taught. So I think that it's important to say, you know, what happens at school needs to back up what I'm trying to do at home. And I remember communicating with my daughter's 5th grade teacher a couple of years ago about, I'm willing to be your partner in education. So I will get my kids a good night's sleep, and I will feed them a healthy breakfast, and I will have them do homework, and I need you to be my partner in health. And when I want my child to be free of high amounts of sugar and junk during the day, and this was a teacher that was giving out Mountain Dews for an A on a math test in 5th grade. And so I think just to come at it not as this antagonistic attack, you, how dare you, but rather, hey, let's partner. I'll be your partner in education, and let's partner in health. So I think that that's a really important message to communicate so that you don't set up an adversarial relationship with the teachers or the school community.
Yeah, I love that. I love that partnering idea. That's a great way to frame it. All right, how about this one? We don't want to break with our school's traditions. For example, we've always had an ice cream social to reward our star athletes, you know, or we've had a cookie dough fundraiser for the past 20 years. You know, it's a tradition.
Well, I think it's important to look at if our school traditions have a negative impact on academic performance and student health, and we're teaching the kids unhealthy habits, it's time to create some new traditions. You know, when we started having those ice cream parties 20 years ago, chances are kids had a lot more opportunity to burn those calories off. And I think that's been a really important message that I've tried to communicate in my work here is this isn't a one single isolated ice cream social. This is a cultural shift in our norms throughout the last 2 decades where kids have had far more opportunities to take calories in and less to burn them. And back to that Mountain Dew example, the teacher had a major aha when I said, you know, my daughter gets 1 day a week of physical education and 1 15-minute recess a day. She's supposed to be getting an hour of moderate to vigorous physical activity. So that Mountain Dew has a far bigger impact on her now than it might have when I was in school 20 years ago, because I had daily PE and I had recess more often. So I think that that's really important in all of our messaging, that the blame isn't on one ice cream social, and it's not on one cookie dough fundraiser, and it's not on one teacher that's taking away recess as a punishment. It's really this combined effect of increased calories in and fewer opportunities to burn them. And usually when you start making that point, whether it's to a fellow PTA members or a group of teachers, they all nod their heads and go, okay. And I think that's where the light starts to click. And a lot of the backpedaling I have done, because those of us who are passionate about this typically come in as crusaders for this, and we live in a little bubble where most of the people we know don't feed their kids juice full of red dye and high fructose corn syrup, and forget that it's a very sensitive issue. But when we can somehow paint the picture as this big picture with a big solution that all of us are involved in, it takes that defensive mechanism now or down. So I think that's a really important piece to cover.
Okay, how about this one? Kids like what we're serving them now. We don't want that to change.
Well, my favorite quote ever was from Ann Cooper, who's the renegade lunch lady in Boulder, when I put this same kind of hypothetical argument to her to have her tell me what she would say to it. And my favorite quote was, well, kids would like a shot of heroin in the arm if we gave them one, I'm sure. And I think while that's far more drastic, there's a lot of things that kids like that we don't offer them because of the negative consequences. Riding their bikes without helmets, staying home from school, smoking tobacco, drinking beer. Sometimes we have to remember that kids aren't in charge for a reason, we are. And it takes some time, patience, and a lot of attempts to try the same new foods to change their preferences, but it's worth the effort. There was a mom here in Fort Collins. We had a panel um, uh, of folks around making these kind of healthy changes. And she told a great story about her grandmother 40 years ago was a lunch lady out in rural Colorado, and they introduced the taco back in the cafeteria. And she recounts how many tacos got thrown in the garbage can because it was something new to the kids. Like, what is this thing wrapped up in a crunchy shell? And they threw away taco after taco, and it took some time. And while the taco isn't the thing we're trying to bring in, well, maybe a healthy taco, it's just a good illustration that any change, whether it's kale or a taco, if it's new to a kid, it just takes some time and some willingness to keep at it.
And what if parents are concerned that we're removing foods that are an important part of their particular cultural heritage?
This is a great question, and I think I really appreciate that it's being asked because it's my daughter was at a dual language immersion school, and this came up time and time again. You know, culture change is hard. It takes time and patience, and we're not suggesting that any heritage should discard its traditions in every setting all the time, but we do encourage unhealthier foods be offered on a limited basis and at home, you know, not in the school setting. I think it's up to parents to be the ones to decide, you know, where and what context their kids can be served those things. If the foods are served and shared at school are if they're healthy, parents can be more comfortable offering occasional treats at home because we have more control over the timing and the quantity, and we keep moderation as the guiding principle. I think it's also important that we encourage families from different cultures to share healthy components of their diet. I mean, there's tons of research around how traditional Mexican and Latin American cuisine is far healthier than what it is when Latin Americans and Mexicans immigrate to the United States and what we as Americans turn their diets into. So, you know, capitalizing on the fresh fruits and vegetables. And for example, we did a Try a New Food Friday at my daughter's dual language Spanish-speaking immersion school. And we had things like jicama with the squeeze of lime juice and the chili spices, and we try, you know, avocados and things that are healthy and part of other culture food to bridge that gap. So I think we can capitalize on those differences and cultural strengths to show kids healthy things versus using it as a crutch to say, oh, well, we don't want to take away somebody's right to bring cupcakes because it's part of their culture.
Great, great ideas. So what about when schools say they can't afford any new initiatives, you know? Their budget barely covers what's needed for academics, much less for music and the arts. Where's there room for wellness?
Well, there's no question that budgets are tight, and I think we have to acknowledge that and really show that we're listening and we support the notion that, you know, budgets are tight. And also, as I said before, and as you had mentioned earlier, creating the healthy school culture, it takes time, patience, creativity, and perseverance. My daughter's in 7th grade this year, and I started this work when she was a kindergartner, and there are still things that I'm chipping away at, you know, and think, well, it's a culture shift, and it does take time. And again, for a lot of project funding, it may be necessary, but they don't have to be done all at once. And so many can be done without funding at all, like healthy celebrations, changing the, you know, snack policies, physical fitness breaks, moving recess to before lunch. And there's a lot of grant opportunities out there, whether it be local, state, or even national. There was a great, another parent champion here in Colorado had a quote that I love, which is, you know, add before you take away, and I don't, that kind of fits in here. But in my experience at the first school that I had some impact, the first thing I did was to start a wellness-oriented fundraiser. And so I didn't come in with my arms swinging about cupcakes and candy and Mountain Dew being given out, because again, food is very territorial, and but a fitness fundraiser where kids are running laps around the school and music is playing and they're getting pledges from their friends and families and grandmother. And we raised $9,000 the first year at a school with about 270 kids, 60% of whom were on free and reduced lunch. And they had never seen a fundraiser bring in that kind of money in its first year especially. And all of a sudden the norm started to shift. And that was a fall activity. In the following spring, in the same year, when the PTO was planning the carnival that we do every year, and the whole renting the cotton candy machine came up, it wasn't I who said, should we have cotton candy at the carnival? It was another parent who said, you know, we did that wellness fundraiser in the fall, and we're really trying to be a wellness school, and I don't think we should have cotton candy. And I just sat there and smiled and said, great. And the other thing is that, you know, if you start with a wellness fundraiser like that, it's really wise to earmark some of those funds to go towards ongoing wellness initiatives. We got the PTA to pass a, what do you pass in a PTA policy, that 30% of the earnings every year from that fundraiser would go to support wellness, and the rest could be used to buy books or whatever it was that the school needed. So I think that that's another thing to look at, is what can we do in the name of health and wellness as a fundraiser that can add to our school budget and promote, you know, whether it's we use that money to add an extra PE day, we did early morning fitness, we did the try a new food things. And lastly, I just want to direct you again to the learning connection. There's a lot in there about how healthier practices can increase schools' bottom lines. So things like how schools can get a financial boost by offering more nutritious meals and snacks, and some other things that are helpful for parents.
Great. Thanks so much, Deirdre. Do you have anything else to add? Or Leslie, do you have anything else you'd like to add to this, the questions and concerns?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that everything that Deirdre has mentioned has been great, and I think I've even learned a few tips myself, having, you know, young children, just getting started in the new school environment. I would just also say that if the principal is the one making any of these arguments or expressing any of the concerns, and really seems to be especially stuck on, you know, retaining his or her viewpoint, you might want to just take that as a sign that you'll need to spend some time bringing on other parents, you know, to the cause. So if there's several parents that are speaking up to the principal on one particular issue, then he or she might be more likely to give it the go-ahead. So just, you know, realizing that there might be a little bit more power in numbers if you get, you know, a few parent advocates on your side.
That's a great point, Leslie. And I would add to that by saying, you know, we had the experience here in our community where we didn't have a very supportive superintendent, and we have over 50 schools in our district, and so trying to get every single principal on board would be really time intensive. And so we, you know, we went all the way up to the school board, and some people feel like, oh, that's completely overwhelming and daunting, but if you live in a small community, chances are maybe one of your neighbors is a school board member, or your aunt, or you run into them at the grocery store if you worked on a campaign. And they are responsible for setting school district policy in a lot of communities. And that's where we had some success in saying, this is something our board values, and we got it written into board policy. And then the superintendent doesn't have any choice but to, you know, bring some things into practice that support that. So that's another piece. And I love the quote in the beginning of the webinar about building the case for the why before you jump to the what and the how. And I would say that I've learned that lesson the hard way, and I can't say enough about how long you should really spend in that phase of building support and talking to other parents and just having casual conversations or doing presentations. And Action for Healthy Kids has a great PowerPoint that they can share. I've used it at my child's middle school to do a presentation to the whole staff that just really talks about why. And that might be all you do in the first 6 months or a year, but it really does set the foundation for a lot less resistance and more support for this work.
Thanks, Deirdre. And I've got the link to that presentation up on the screen right now. It's called Share Healthy Food and Activity at School. And really the point is just like Deirdre said, to call all members of the school community to work together on these issues and, you know, to be providing kids with consistent messages. The presentation has a lot of the same slides that are in this webinar, the ones on the conflicting messages, rewards, and physical activity, and the obesity slides, and the best practices. So it's just a condensed version of this webinar that would be directed at members of your school community, and we'll send a link to that out after the webinar along with handouts that summarize both these questions and concerns as well as everything that we covered in the webinar. And so let's go to Hannah, who has been manning the controls in the background. And Hannah, it looks like we do possibly have some questions from our audience. We've still got a few minutes, and you could go ahead and direct those to us. We'll see if we can answer them.
Yeah. So we have a couple of questions, Carol, about getting more ideas or lists for alternatives for healthy snacks for classroom parties or school celebrations. So do you have tips for that, or a place where you can direct people for more resources?
Absolutely. We have lots of, Action for Healthy Kids has tons of tips and resources related to that. In fact, as part of this Parent Leadership Series, there is a whole section on how to create a healthier school food culture, and snacks, rewards, anything having to do with food in the school's culture outside of school meals is covered on that. And so after the webinar and the follow-up, when I send out the link to the Share Healthy Food and Activity presentation, in the same place you'll find links to all of our handouts related to that.
And Carol, I'll send you, and if you don't already have it, Poudre Valley Hospital, now University of Colorado Health North, our Healthy Kids Club and Can Do put together that Healthy Celebrations guide that we've put up online, and it's got games and books that are relevant broken down by holiday. So it has a whole section on Valentine's and Halloween, and to make it really easy for parents to plan a party that's not centered around food.
And I do have the link to that, so I will definitely do that. That's a great idea.
Awesome. Thank you. We have another question about what can be done when schools take away PE in order to prepare students for state-level testing.
Deirdre, I bet you have an answer to that.
This is definitely a valid concern, and I think it's something that is happening, and I think a lot of what we talked about today goes back to that messaging and showing examples about school districts that have invested in physical education and what's happened to their test scores. You know, one of the things that's really important is to understand the culture of decision-making within your school or your school district so that you know where to put your emphasis. And that was a lesson that we learned. Our school district is one called site-based management. So ultimately, something like physical education is up to a principal. And Colorado is the last state in the country with no physical education requirements. And so, you know, if your principal is the one who's making that decision, then they are the one who needs to hear about the research and the literature supporting health and movement. I think, too, you know, using the data, but then also some anecdotes, asking an adult, do you remember the last conference in a hotel ballroom that you went to and how long you sat, and how much do you remember retaining versus when you were on a hike outside or on a bike ride, or, you know, and really getting them to realize that the sit, get, and forget is not the best model. And if it's, you know, a larger district initiative that's taking the PE away or reducing PE, then those decision makers need to be influenced by those stories and the research from across the country. The National Association of Sports and Physical Education, NASPE, has some great resources specifically around advocating for physical education. They have toolkits and resources for parents and messaging, and all that is available.
Awesome. Thank you. I also just wanted to add there that, you know, we encourage very much so during testing week that we should have our students eating breakfast. You know, schools push that message a lot because the research has tied that breakfast is really important for kids to, get their brains going and fueled up for the day. The same is true for recess, and a lot of administrators just don't understand that point. So helping administrators and teachers understand that it's important for kids not only to eat a good breakfast, but also to be active, to fuel and energize their brains is a good message to send.
Absolutely. And there's been some great work done in, I know in our district and probably others across the country, where physical education teachers are integrating core subject areas. So for example, we have an elementary PE teacher here who has started to do literacy, and he'll have a maze where the first graders are going through a maze in the gymnasium, or they're playing scooter tag with sight words, and really working as a teaching team and integrating some of those academic concepts into PE, art, and music, so that, we're not, quote unquote, just letting them play ball, which is what the misconception some have. But I think that's another piece that could be highlighted and emphasized.
Absolutely. We have another question from a woman who said that their school is using daily candy sales to bridge funding gaps. Their school is located in a low-income neighborhood with about 230 students, and they raise about $75,000 a year in daily candy sales. And the district and the school argues that they, quote-unquote, need that money to pay for office supplies and band trips. How would you guys suggest helping her convince her school that it's important to shift this priority, especially given the kind of high poverty area?
My initial answer is goes towards, does the community have a dental society and a medical society, and could they be brought on board? If that $75,000 figure was put out to a dental society or medical society or a larger community to say, hey, let's help our local school come up with a different way of raising money, because the dentists are a forgotten entity that we kind of forget to include in our efforts. We think about obesity and health, but we forget about oral hygiene and health. So that would be one avenue that would be worth pursuing, and seeing if you could get a little bit of advocacy from those groups versus just you as an angry parent. The other thing would be to involve kids. I mean, sometimes we often forget to include them in the brainstorming about, okay, kids, we know that this isn't good for you, and yada, yada, yada. What ideas do you guys have about ways we could raise money for our school?
I love that idea. I love the idea about bringing in, your medical partners. I know you've told me in the past before that you've been able to get changes much more quickly and much more easily when you bring in medical professionals that have, high credibility. And so I think that's a really great idea.
Yeah, I often think about... Oh, sorry, go ahead. No.
I was also going to add that the research does show that you can transition fundraisers like that to healthier options and not have the revenue decline. So in some cases, you see that revenue maybe dips a little bit when the product is switched from an unhealthy option like candy to a healthier option. It might dip for a little bit, but it will come back up to the level that it was before, and oftentimes it will increase to include a higher revenue. So there's examples of that in our Learning Connection report and highlighted on the Action for Healthy Kids website. And you can use that as an argument to show that you can still get that revenue and fund the programs that you need to with the budget gap while also promoting a healthy message.
Well, great. I think we are at the top of our hour, so I would like to say thank you so much to our presenters today, to Leslie in Louisiana and to Deirdre. You've both given us lots of great tips and resources for this issue. And to close, I would just like to encourage you to register for our next webinar in the series, which is How to Work with Schools and Wellness Policies 101, which is taking place on Tuesday, no, not October 1st, taking place early in March. And we'll send out the date and a link to that webinar in the follow-up email, which you should receive in 2 to 3 business days. Also, if you want to learn more about Action for Healthy Kids and how you can get more involved with our mission and our movement, we'd love for you to take the Every Kid Healthy Pledge and help us create a 100,000-person movement to make all schools healthier. It just takes 10 seconds to take the pledge on our website, and once you've signed on, we will show you ways, big and small, that you can turn your commitment into action. Thanks so much for your time today, and have a great day.